My parents ditched my wedding for my sister's anniversary. Grandpa's reaction? He threatened to cut them out of his will. My parents didn't show up to my wedding. They weren't sick. They weren't out of the country. They just didn't come. Because my sister, their golden child, decided to throw a last-minute anniversary celebration on the same day. And they chose her. I wish I could say I didn't see it coming. But deep down I knew something like this would happen. Because in my family, I was never the favorite. I was the afterthought. The reliable one. The one who didn't need as much attention. But this was more than favoritism. This was betrayal, wrapped in pastel-colored party invitations. Let me back up. I'm 27. I've always been the quiet one in the family. Studious, practical, the kind of kid who didn't cause trouble, didn't talk back, didn't demand much. My sister, on the other hand, is 2 years younger. Loud, charming, impulsive, and somehow always the victim, no matter what chaos she caused. Our parents never hid their preference. They doted on her, made excuses, looked the other way when she lied, manipulated, or burned bridges. And whenever I brought it up, even gently, I was told I was being jealous, dramatic, ungrateful. So I stopped bringing it up. I moved out at 18, put myself through college, got engaged to a man who actually saw me, listened to me, loved me for who I was. Planning the wedding was the happiest I'd felt in years. Until it wasn't, because just a few months before the big day, little things started to go wrong. Or maybe they weren't things. Maybe it was people, certain people, family, with voices that got quieter when I walked in the room. Plans that suddenly didn't include me, texts that went unanswered. And at the center of all that silence was my sister. When the whispering started, I thought they were planning something sweet. That's how hopeful I still was. Every time I walked into a room at my parents' house, conversation would shift. Not abruptly, not like a door slamming, but just enough to notice. Mom would suddenly find something in the oven. Dad would clear his throat and check his phone. My sister would glance at me with that too wide smile she always wore when she was hiding something. I assumed they were working on a surprise, a sentimental slideshow, maybe, a family toast. A small gesture to show they were truly present in this moment with me, for me. I let myself believe that, because despite everything, the childhood favoritism, the passive dismissal, the years of feeling invisible, I wanted this wedding to be different. I wanted us to be a family again, even if only for a day. So I ignored the awkward silences. I ignored the way my sister kept avoiding dress discussions, venue logistics, anything related to the ceremony. I ignored the way my parents always forgot which weekend the wedding was, even after I'd reminded them 4 times. They weren't cruel. That's the thing. Cruelty would have been easier to confront. They were polite, smiling, just absent. When they did talk about the wedding, it was like a box they were checking. Oh, right, that's coming up soon, isn't it? As if it weren't their daughter's only wedding. As if they were speaking about someone else's event. But still, I stayed calm. I sent itineraries, offered to help coordinate transportation. I kept my expectations low and my emails brief. A month out, I asked if they had any questions, anything they wanted to help with. They said, "No, honey, it's your day. We don't want to interfere." That line should have been comforting, but it landed like a soft threat, like they were already halfway out the door. And then came the invitations, or more specifically, one invitation I wasn't supposed to see. I was at their house helping my mom print some last-minute documents. She'd stepped out for a call, and I noticed a cream envelope on the kitchen counter with my sister's handwriting. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a glossy card, decked out in florals and gold cursive. "You're invited to a surprise anniversary party for Emma and Luke. Date, same as my wedding. Time, same exact hour. Location, a private estate, not 10 minutes from my venue." For a moment, I couldn't move. My sister wasn't married. She was on and off with her boyfriend Luke, who had cheated on her 3 times and proposed once while drunk on New Year's Eve. They'd been dating less than 2 years. No wedding, no official anniversary, no story. And yet here it was, a party, a celebration, a direct conflict. It wasn't just disrespect, it was strategic. I didn't say anything that day. Not to my mom, not to my sister, not even to my fiancé. I tucked the invitation back into its envelope, gently, like it might break in my hands. Then I walked back to the printer, forced my fingers to act normal, printed the forms I needed, and smiled my way out of that house like nothing had changed. Except, of course, everything had. I drove home with both windows down, even though it was barely 50 degrees out. I needed the noise, the sting of cold air against my skin, something to interrupt the roaring in my head. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe the date was wrong. Maybe Emma was planning something entirely unrelated, and it was just a bizarre, unforgivable coincidence. Maybe Mom and Dad didn't even know about it, but I knew better. I knew my sister. And the more I thought about it, the more the pieces started clicking together. Her sudden disinterest in my dress, her flat response when I showed her the venue, the way she kept forgetting dates, the odd look she gave me when I mentioned the guest list. They weren't innocent lapses. They were groundwork. I didn't accuse anyone. I didn't rage. I just observed. I started paying attention to conversations more closely. The way my parents talked about the wedding, or more often didn't. The way Emma acted overly cheerful when I brought up final payments, RSVP counts, timelines. How she deflected any direct question and spun it into something about her life. It wasn't new behavior, but now I saw it differently. And yet, I still wanted to give them a chance to explain. So a few days later, I invited my parents over for dinner. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet night, something casual, calm. I made their favorite pasta, lit a few candles, poured them wine, and waited until we were halfway through the meal before gently asking, "Hey, is there something going on that day?" They looked at each other, briefly, just a flicker, and then my mom laughed. "Oh, honey, Emma's just doing something small. It's nothing serious." Nothing serious. A formal printed invitation, a rented estate, full catering, gold trim, matching fonts. "Will you be coming to the wedding?" I asked, because I had to. My father didn't answer right away. He took a sip of wine, then cleared his throat. "We're still figuring things out," he said. "We don't want to hurt anyone's feelings." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard in my life. They weren't confused. They weren't caught off guard. They were choosing. After that dinner, something inside me shut off. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. It was closer to grief. Not loud, not explosive. Just slow, quiet understanding that the people who raised me, the ones I still wanted to believe would do the right thing, had already made their decision. They weren't coming, and they weren't sorry. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream or break anything. I sat on the floor of my living room, holding the final seating chart in my hands, and just stared at it. 2 empty seats near the front, reserved for mother of the bride and father of the bride. Seats that would now remain symbolic, placeholders for people who chose a party over their daughter. Emma never brought up her event again, not directly, but the smugness in her tone when she asked, "Are you nervous about your big day?" told me everything I needed to know. She wanted me to know she won, that even on my wedding day, she was the headline, and maybe she thought I'd cave, that I'd beg for peace, plead with our parents, compromise. I didn't. Instead, I distanced, quietly, deliberately. I stopped answering texts that weren't urgent. I finalized everything with my fiancé. Guest list, vows, vendors. I focused on the people who were showing up, like Grandpa. He called me the next morning after the dinner. He didn't ask questions. He didn't pry. He just said, "You okay, sweetheart?" His voice was the first one that didn't sound laced with doubt. Growing up, Grandpa had always been my safe place. When I was little, I spent nearly every summer at his cabin. We'd make pancakes from scratch, watch thunderstorms from the porch, and play cards until late while he told me stories about how he built the house himself with his father. He listened when others didn't. He remembered the small things. When I got accepted into college, he framed the letter. When I got engaged, he cried harder than my parents. He was the only adult in my life who never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. Just me. That was always enough for him. I didn't tell him everything on that call. Just enough. That Emma was planning something. That our parents were conflicted. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a quiet, steady response. "Don't worry about them. I'll be there." And that was all I needed to hear. The week before the wedding felt like a strange kind of dream. Everything was in place, the dress steamed and hanging, the tables arranged, the guests confirming. But something inside me felt suspended, as if time had stopped just for me, like I was trapped between 2 versions of the same day, one with my family in it and one without. I didn't tell anyone that my parents might not come. I didn't want the pity, or worse, the judgment. Because once you speak those words out loud, my own parents aren't attending my wedding. It becomes real in a way that sticks to your skin, and I wasn't ready for that yet. So I smiled through final meetings with the florist. I helped the photographer scout angles at the venue. I laughed with my bridesmaids and practiced holding my bouquet in the mirror. But inside, I was still bracing for the empty chairs. Grandpa called every evening that week. Sometimes just for a few minutes, sometimes longer. He never pushed, never asked for updates. He just wanted to hear my voice. I didn't know that while we spoke about weather forecasts and seating plans, he was having very different conversations behind the scenes with them. I didn't know that 2 days before the wedding, he showed up at my parents' house unannounced, that he sat down at their kitchen table, the same table where they'd once hosted my graduation dinner, and quietly, without raising his voice, told them exactly how disappointed he was. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. He simply reminded them what it meant to be a parent, what kind of legacy they were building, what their silence was doing to their daughter. And then he said one more thing, a sentence that would eventually reach me, but not yet. Because I was still in the eye of the storm, packing my overnight bag for the hotel, checking the list for the 100th time, looking at my phone every time it buzzed, and realizing it was never them. Emma was still holding her event. I saw photos online, balloons, champagne, gold lettering that said, "To New Beginnings." She was calling it a renewal, though no one could explain what exactly was being renewed. I turned off my notifications. The night before the wedding, I stood in my hotel room, staring out the window, watching the staff below set up string lights over the reception lawn. The air smelled like cut grass and new linens. And for a moment, a very quiet, painful moment, I let myself accept the truth. They weren't coming. I wouldn't see my mother's face as I walked down the aisle. I wouldn't hear my father's voice telling me how proud he was. That chapter was already closed. And the only person left, still writing with me, was Grandpa. The night before my wedding, I barely slept. Not because I was anxious about the dress, or the guests, or the weather, but because I kept replaying every memory I had of my parents, trying to stitch together some version of them that I could still believe in. I went to bed at midnight and stared at the ceiling until 3. At 4, I gave up and sat by the window with a cup of tea that had gone cold long before I even noticed. I watched the sun rise behind the trees and tried to imagine what it would feel like to walk down the aisle and not see them there. I didn't cry. Not then. Not yet. I'd already cried my share of quiet, lonely tears in the weeks leading up to this. Now, all I had left was a strange, numb steadiness, the kind that comes after too many disappointments. At 7, the makeup artist arrived. My best friend brought bagels and coffee, the room filled with chatter, hairspray, and the low hum of curling irons. Everyone was glowing, giddy, laughing about tiny things. And I smiled with them. Because what else could I do? I couldn't tell them that half of my family was pretending the day didn't exist. I couldn't say out loud that my mother still hadn't called, that my father hadn't texted. People asked if I was excited. I nodded. They asked if I was nervous. I shook my head. No one asked if I was sad. And maybe that was the hardest part. By 11, the photographer had arrived. We took photos in our robes, then in our dresses, then with flowers, then pretending to drink champagne while the real bottle waited for the reception. At some point, Grandpa arrived. He didn't say much, just kissed me on the forehead and squeezed my hands. He looked sharp. Navy blue suit, perfectly pressed shirt, the cufflinks my grandmother had given him 30 years ago. "You look like your mom used to," he said softly, when she still smiled without forcing it. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just hugged him. He stayed close the rest of the morning, sitting in a quiet corner watching everything. He didn't hover. He just was there, like a lighthouse, silent, constant. At noon, someone from the staff came in to say guests were arriving. I peeked through the curtain just once, just long enough to feel my heart drop and settle like a stone. I didn't see them. I went back to the chair, had my lipstick reapplied, and told myself this was still going to be a beautiful day. Because it was. I was marrying the love of my life. I was surrounded by friends who chose me without obligation. I had a grandfather who hadn't missed a moment since the day I was born. I could still breathe. I could still smile. I could still walk down that aisle with my head held high. And so, when the music started and the coordinator gave me the signal, I took a deep breath and stepped forward. Every eye turned toward me, every phone lifted, and still, I didn't look for them. I refused to, because they made their choice, and I wasn't going to give them space in my heart if they weren't even willing to show up in the room. But just as I passed the 3rd row, something shifted. I saw movement out of the corner of my eye, a pair of figures slipping into the very back, quiet, careful. My heart caught in my throat, but I kept walking, refusing to look. Only after the ceremony, only once I was off the stage and hugging people and blinking away the surreal glow of it all, did I let myself glance back. And there they were, my parents, sitting stiffly in their seats like they'd been dropped from another timeline. They didn't speak, they didn't cry, but they were there. The reception blurred together in a golden haze. I remember the clink of glasses, the soft music under laughter, the flash of 100 cameras, my husband's hand in mine, the cake we barely ate, the speeches I only half heard, but I don't remember looking for them again. Once I saw them, once I knew they had arrived, I couldn't bring myself to care whether they stayed, whether they smiled, whether they approved, because they were no longer the center of my world. They were orbiting now, distant stars, present but dim, and the light around me, it came from elsewhere. When the night ended and the guests began to drift out, I finally sat down. My feet ached, my cheeks hurt from smiling. My heart was full and fractured all at once. That's when Grandpa came and sat beside me. He didn't say anything right away. He just leaned back, crossed his arms, and looked out across the dimming lawn. The staff were blowing out candles, gathering vases. The world was quiet again. Then, softly, they weren't planning to come. I turned to him slowly. He didn't look at me, just kept his eyes forward. They made their choice days ago. Said Emma would be upset if they missed it. Said your wedding was stressful anyway. He paused. So I told them they had another choice. My chest tightened. He continued, voice calm, unwavering. I told them they could attend your wedding, or be removed from my will. No shares, no property, no cabin, nothing. Still, he didn't look at me. I built this life with my bare hands, and I'm not passing it on to people who forget their own daughter. I sat in stunned silence. Not because I didn't believe him, but because, somewhere deep down, I had hoped, even now, that maybe they came for me, that something inside them stirred, pulled them out the door and into those last two seats. But it hadn't. It wasn't love, it was loss. Fear of losing something else, something material. And I realized in that moment, their love had always been conditional, their presence transactional. I turned toward Grandpa. He finally met my eyes. His were soft, tired, but full of something stronger than sympathy. You deserved better a long time ago, he said. I just didn't say it loud enough. I didn't cry. I leaned my head against his shoulder and we sat there until the lanterns went out. Weeks have passed now. Life has resumed its usual pace. My husband and I returned from our honeymoon with a new rhythm to our mornings, a comfort I never expected to find in another person, the kind of quiet joy that doesn't need grand gestures to feel real. My parents have tried to reach out, a card, a message. I haven't responded. It's not spite, it's self-preservation. I've learned that love isn't always enough, not when it's handed out like a coupon, valid only if someone else doesn't get offended. I still think about that moment on the aisle, when I saw them slip in, and I still wonder, would they have come if Grandpa hadn't spoken up? But I know the answer, and knowing it hasn't broken me, it's freed me, because now I know who will show up when it counts, who will sit beside me even when the seats are empty, who will fight for me when I'm too tired to fight for myself, and who I want by my side for the rest of my life.